Hello and welcome to part 15 of this Kerbal Space Program 2 for Science video series. So in part 14, as you can see, we got our rocket into orbit around Tylo, and in this video we are going to be circularising our orbit and actually landing at the Tylo Monument. Now before we get into it, there are a couple of things I would just like to mention. Number one, when I was designing this rocket, I had to go to Tylo many times to actually test the lander, and it was highly frustrating when I'd get to Tylo after doing all the different gravity assists and everything to find out the lander didn't work. So a little tip for that is if you press Alt F8 on your keyboard, you actually get the cheat options, which I really wish I'd have known this a couple of weeks ago when I started preparing for this. But the main thing that we can see, obviously you can add science and show the aero GUI and the, disable localization. I'm not sure what that does. But the main thing is if you hit the teleport bit, you can actually teleport to anywhere around the Kerbal system. You can get yourself into orbit, you can put yourself on the surface, you can even rendezvous with craft that are already in space. So, like I say, if you are designing a lander for anywhere in particular and you're having trouble with it, then I would highly recommend actually designing the lander, launching it to the pad, and then just transporting yourself into orbit around the actual body to test it, and then before you can actually do the actual mission. But yeah, like I say, I wish I'd have known that a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, that's the first little thing I'd like to mention. The second one is that I've had a couple of comments of people saying that they'd actually like to see this rocket actually doing the launch and seeing all the different staging and so on. And of course in the last video I did cut the launch out because, well, the performance was quite bad, and also we have done a few launches already, so there wouldn't have been much to talk about. But on that note, what I have done is I've actually created a little bit of a kind of bonus video which I'm going to pop at the end of this one. It's a little treat for everybody who wants to see this rocket in actually doing the launch, so yeah, stick around for that. Obviously you could just skip to the end of the video if you wanted to, but yeah, I'd like you to stick around for that, and yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy it. But anyway, let's get into this actual video itself. So as you can see, like I say, we're in orbit. However, if you've seen the last video, you'll know that we weren't actually, well, we haven't circularised our orbit yet. We've got quite a high apoapsis. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One reason is that if we were to try and circularise from, well, when coming into Tylo, then we would use quite a lot of delta V, and if we were to do it right now, let's see what actually happens. So you can see what's happening is it's going to cost quite a lot of delta V. It's also sending us straight into a collision course with Tylo, so we would have to mess around with our radial arrows. And the more you mess around with your radial arrows, the more it will actually raise your periapsis up, which I don't particularly want. I want to try and keep our periapsis at around about 50 kilometers. So what we're going to do is, instead of doing that all in one burn and it taking 4 minutes, what we can do is we can do what's called a split burn. And a split burn basically means just doing several burns to actually lower your apoapsis in increments. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create the maneuver on the periapsis. And because this stage has 452 delta V in it, what we'll do is we'll start off by just doing a 452 delta V burn. And if you don't actually know the delta V in your actual current stage, because sometimes it'll just say 0, what you can do is you can look out for the 2 number to turn up on the burn gauge, and once that turns up, then you'll know that you are actually going on to the next stage. So we'll make sure we're at the correct number. And then what we're going to do is we're going to zoom into the periapsis. And I don't know if this is strictly like, well, I don't know if this will make it any more accurate, but what I like to do is I like to actually get the orange and the blue periapses to actually match up. So we'll move it around. And the idea here is we're using something called the Oberth effect. Now, I don't really know much about the Oberth effect. It's something to do with, as we are getting close to the planet, our periapsis, we're actually travelling a lot faster, whereas, as opposed to the apoapsis. So it's good for getting your orbit higher. I don't know if it'll affect getting it lower, but yeah, like I say, I don't really understand the Oberth effect that much, so I'm not going to try and explain it too deeply. But anyway, yeah, now we've got that set, you can see it is now bringing our periapsis down, or apoapsis down to 763, and it would take 2 minutes and 41 seconds. Now, that's still a little bit long for me, because the longer you spend away from pointing at retrograde or prograde when doing a burn, the less efficient it is. So what I'm actually going to do is, instead of burning the full tank, I'm actually going to burn it half. So we'll go for about 225 instead. Now, as you can see, that's a much more manageable 1 minute burn. So yeah, we'll just make sure the periapses are actually matching again. And now that is set, we can point at the manoeuvre and perform this burn. And we're already pretty much pointed at the manoeuvre anyway. So yeah, we'll just warp to it and actually do the burn. Right, so now that is done, you can see it's brought our apoapsis down nicely. And now, ordinarily, what you might do is you might delete the manoeuvre and then do it all again. But what we can do is, instead of doing that, we can actually just open up the manoeuvre and then click on any of the arrows, and it will automatically bring it down. However, as you can see, it's still saying 0, so to fix that, we do need to move the manoeuvre node around. And also, just while we're here, one little thing that a question that I had was, how did I get the arrows up around the manoeuvre node? And the best way to do that is just to right-click on it, and you'll get these 4 different buttons. And of course, you've got the warp to manoeuvre button, delete manoeuvre button. I have no idea what the green box means, but if you want to move the manoeuvre around, you can just grab the top one and you can move it quite easily. So we'll make sure the periapses are set up, and of course now we've moved it around, it's also reset the time. And like you can see, it's saying a 222 burn again, but I'll just make sure that is the full 225 for this. And now we are already pretty much pointed at the manoeuvre, so we can do the same thing again and warp to the manoeuvre. And we're just going to keep doing this until we bring our manoeuvre or our apoapsis down so that it's around about 50 kilometers. So you can see now, if we were to do another 225 kilometer burn, we would be going straight into the surface. So now we can actually look into circularizing. So we'll raise it back up again, and we'll just do our standard circularization maneuver. That looks pretty good to me. So yeah, now we just need to make sure we are definitely pointed at the manoeuvre, which we should be because we haven't even deleted the manoeuvre planner yet. And now all we need to do is once again warp to the manoeuvre and perform our final circularization burn. There we go. So that is a good technique to use when you're using particularly low thrust and high ISP engines. So for example, the last engine we were using was the Tuba engine, which is a low thrust engine, and the nuclear engine is also low thrust. So that, like I say, if your burn is going to be more than say a couple of minutes, then I'd recommend trying to split it into a split burn. But anyway, now that is set, we can actually start thinking about our landing. So let's have a look at where the monument is. There we are. You can see the monument is right there in that little crater, and we can already automatically see that the well, our inclination's no good, so we are going to need to change the inclination. So let's first of all check which direction we are travelling in. So it looks like we're going in that direction. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a manoeuvre at 90 degrees from the actual you know, the marker. And when I went to Juno, what I said was to line it up and then place the manoeuvre on the edge of your orbit and create the manoeuvre. However, there's a problem with that, because if we now look down, you can see we're not actually at 90 degrees, we're more like 45 degrees. So it's not actually the best way to do it. What we need to do is we actually need to make sure that our manoeuvre is more at 90 degrees, and then we'll get a much better inclination change for that. So we'll sort this out, and the reason we're doing it in this side and not the other side is because I also want to lower our orbit using the nuclear stage and then reorbit it as well, because we want to keep that above 50 kilometers. The main reason for that is during the test I did find that quite often if we had the nuclear stage below 50 kilometers, when reloading to it, if we needed to do a quick save and a quick load, quite often the side tanks would fall off, which was highly irritating. So we'll get our inclination down to start off with. Looks like it still might be a little bit high, and the only problem with having the manoeuvre node so far around like that is it's harder to actually judge the inclination changes. But yeah, that looks pretty good to me, so we'll set that burn up, and then like I say, once this is done, we'll create another manoeuvre on the back of our orbit, and we'll actually lower the periapsis to around about 35 kilometers. So now that's done, like I say, we need to actually lower our orbit, so let's quickly just check our inclination out. Yeah, that looks about right. So like I say, we'll create a manoeuvre on the back of the orbit from where the actual signal is. And we're using the nuclear stage for this because I want to try and use all of the fuel in the lander to actually get us down to landing. However, one thing we need to be careful with the nuclear stage is you'll see it says it's got 633 delta V at the moment, which wouldn't be anywhere near enough to actually get back to Kerbin from here. However, that is because at the moment we're hauling such a heavy lander, whereas once we get rid of the lander, then it'll bring it up to a couple of thousand easy. Generally, I've found we don't want to be going any lower than half a tank, because half a tank's worth of fuel should be able to get us back. But anyway, yeah, now that is set, we can do our deorbit manoeuvre. And just like any deorbit manoeuvre, what we'll do is we'll perform the burn, we'll decouple the lander, and then we will actually go straight back to prograde and get ourselves back up into orbit. But before we do that, we actually need to make sure we have some Kerbals in the lander. So we'll go to the Kerbal manager, and I'll tell you what, let's send the classic quartet for this. So we'll send Bob, Jeb, Val and Bill, and we'll leave Tim all on his lonesome in the command module. Now we're ready, we can walk to this manoeuvre and perform the burn. Like I say, now that is done, we want to undock the lander. We'll use RCS just to push ourselves away from the lander a little bit so the engines don't hit it. And then we'll point the command module straight back prograde and burn ourselves back up to above 50 kilometers. Right, so now that is set, we can go back to the lander, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hit F5 to quick save, because we want to make sure that we are quick saving when we're above 50,000 meters above sea level, because as I've mentioned, if we're below 50 kilometers, then there is a good chance that when we reload, then the side boosters will fall off, which is less than ideal. So yeah, now the next thing we can do is we can actually hit the science button and get some more science, because we haven't done any science around low orbit yet around Tylo. And now we can start thinking about landing. So if you've seen the build video, you'll know that this lander has 8 solid boosters on the bottom, and we're going to use those to actually deorbit ourselves. So we'll go back to the map, and then what we're going to do is we're going to create a manoeuvre a little way ahead of the target. And you can see on the staging stack that we have 357 delta V in this stage. Now, if you can't see that, then once we do a retrograde burn, we're just going to wait, as I mentioned, until the number 2 shows up on the burn gauge, and that way you'll know that you have burned all the fuel in that stage. But as I say, we're just going to go to 357 because we know exactly how much we need to do. And then what we're also going to do is we're going to move the manoeuvre around and try and get the signal about halfway in between the manoeuvre and the impact mark. So we'll right click on the manoeuvre and grab the arrows, and we'll move it across so they're about halfway along. And originally during the rehearsals for this, I was actually going 3/4 of the way along, which brought us down much better. However, I've tried that and it actually brings us down early, so it would seem that the orbital decay fix has actually changed the way in which we land. So fingers crossed this will work. But anyway, yeah, now that is ready, we can point at the manoeuvre and warp to the burn. And another thing I've also found is that since the new update, warping to the burn, once the warp actually finishes, it can cause the Kraken to awaken and tear our ship apart, which obviously we don't want. So fingers crossed the Kraken will remain slumbering after this warp. But as you can see, now we're below 50 kilometers. The warp has gone to 3 times warp, so we're going to wait until that is done. It's going to take a little while. But before we do actually go there, we need to make sure that our altimeter is set back to ground, because as you can see at the minute it's saying just under 48,000 meters, whereas if we go to ground it says 24. So yeah, there's quite a big difference between sea level and ground level on Tylo, so this is probably the most important planet to make sure you're actually set to ground level, otherwise it's easy to completely misjudge your descent. But anyway, like I say, once this warp has finished, we will, fingers crossed, hope that the Kraken doesn't wake up, and then we'll actually think about landing. Right, so now the warp has stopped. It's looking relatively stable, so I think the Kraken isn't going to wake up this time, which is good. So yeah, the first thing we'll do then is we will orient the nav ball so that the brown segment is to the top. Because that way, if we need to do any attitude adjustments, it just makes it a lot easier, because then hitting W will pitch us up or forwards, hitting S will pitch us down or backwards, and then A and D will pitch us left and right. But I'm not planning on actually getting to a hover with this and trying to hover over to the target, because the gravity is so high on Tylo that it uses a lot of delta V to actually get into a hover, and the bottom stage of this lander should have a couple of hundred delta V left when we land. But yeah, I'm just going to try and get us down as quickly and as smoothly as possible. But now we are reaching 0 seconds on the manoeuvre time. We'll stage the solid boosters. And now this lag is also something new. I wasn't experiencing this in the practices either, so yeah, fingers crossed the Kraken won't awaken during this burn. But anyway, what we're also going to do then is we're going to press Z to put the throttle to full, so that once we get rid of the solid boosters, the side engines will start up straight away. Now that those engines are done, we can get rid of those. We're also going to point ourselves straight towards retrograde and delete the manoeuvre as well. And now, because we have the little spider engines on all of these side tanks, we can actually see the fuel level in the various tanks on the staging stack. Whereas if we didn't have these spider engines, we wouldn't actually be able to see that, and we would need to go to the resource manager to see what the fuel level was. And personally, I didn't like doing that. I found it a little bit too awkward. So yeah, this way we at least know when to jettison the tanks. So yeah, we're coming in over the top of the target now, which you can see is right there. And fingers crossed we will actually be able to land inside of this crater, because the landing site, well, the ground in this crater is actually quite flat, whereas everywhere else it's a bit hilly and bumpy, so we want to definitely be landing inside of it and not either overshooting or undershooting. But you can see now the first set of tanks have emptied, so we'll jettison those. We'll just keep doing that until we have run out of fuel and we're going down nice and slowly. So it does take quite a lot to actually slow yourself down above Tylo, but this should get us down there quite nicely. So the next set of tanks are getting close to emptying. We can get rid of those. Looks like we are going to overshoot the target a little bit. It looks like we're going to overshoot the target by quite a way here, which is highly frustrating because I've tried it at a quarter way along the manoeuvre and we came in all the way over there. I've tried it halfway along the manoeuvre and we're coming in over here, and even a third of the way or 2/3 of the way along the manoeuvre wasn't good enough, which is frustrating. But anyway, fingers crossed we won't land anywhere bad, so we can extend the landing legs and ladders. We're also going to reduce the throttle now because we're getting down quite to a decent speed on the surface speed velocity bug thing. Apologies for the cats, as usual. But yeah, once we get low enough, we are going to start looking for our shadow, and the shadow does actually show up quite late on Tylo. But like I say, the shadow will give us a good idea of our actual height above the ground. We're also going to increase the throttle a little bit as well because we want to be below 100 meters per second when we're below 1,000 meters above the surface. Yeah, there's the shadow, so we'll keep an eye on that, and we're just going to keep managing our throttle to make sure that we don't slow ourselves down too much and end up going in the opposite direction. But of course we do need to be below 5 meters per second when we actually land, just to make sure that the landing legs don't break. So we'll get ourselves below 5 meters per second. And as soon as we touch down, we will cut the throttle. There we are on the ground. So yeah, it's not the flattest area, but it looks like we should be okay. I just noticed that ladder hasn't opened. Sometimes this happens where the ladder doesn't open, but you can actually still access it. So let's... it's saying it's blocked. Tell you what, we'll have a look at that in a moment, but the first thing we're going to do is we are going to quick save to make sure that if we need to reload, then we won't have to do all that again. Although the one thing I would warn you against with quick saving is that when you quick load on the ground, quite often the landing legs will clip into the ground and then the entire thing will bounce. And because we're on a bit of a slope here, it will probably end up falling over. Now, we still do actually have 400 delta V left in the actual bottom stage, but you know what, I'm not going to bother actually taking off and trying to get to flatter ground because we do have the rover on board, so we should be able to get to the monument relatively easily, which is all the way over there. So let's see, how far is that? It's 12 kilometres away. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a drive, is that? Anyway, like I say, we're going to decouple the rover first. So firstly, we'll go to the parts manager, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to coupling, and I'm going to find the TD12. And yeah, we need to turn that down to 0 kilonewtons, because if we were to leave it at 50 kilonewtons, then it would fire the lander or the rover into the surface, and we could risk breaking something. So now that's set, we can decouple that. And now we're just going to quickly go back to the rover and hit the brakes so that it stops, because we don't want it rolling away on us. And there is one extra difference to this rover, because this is the one I did in my basic rover build. And I have added one extra thing to this, and I've actually added a couple of extra lights to the back. the advanced photonic generators, and what I've done with them is I've actually taken them out of the lights group and put them in the brakes group, so when we brake we actually have brake lights, and I just thought that was kind of cute. But anyway, let's see if we can actually get a Kerbal to this. So we'll go back to the lander. We'll just quickly do the initial science, which is only going to be crew reports at the minute. And then we will, let's EVA Jeb and see if we can't get him down. So we can transfer onto that ladder, but can we transfer onto... Yeah, there we go. See, so for some reason that happens. I don't know why, but yeah, that means that we can actually get down. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to get back up to the actual lander, and we'd probably have to either forget about the, you know, science on the ground and the crew reports, and then just, you know, miss out on a bit of science. But anyway, we can actually get down, so fingers crossed we'll be able to get back up again. But let's get him onto the rover. Make sure the brakes are set, and then we'll go back to the lander, and let's take Val as well. So we'll EVA her and bring her down too. You know what, let's just make sure we can definitely get back up again. Yeah, we can. So that's a relief. I was thinking we were going to have to either leave a couple of Kerbals on the ground or you know, miss out on some science, but yeah, this way we won't be missing out on anything. So let's get these onto the rover. And now, because we're actually outside of the crater, we're actually in a different biome here. So we're currently in the lowlands biome. So if we hit the research button, you can see that we are getting a bit of science, and we're also getting our ground survey. And I like the little animation on the arm as well, the way you can see the soil being sucked up into it. That's kind of cool. And now that is set, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to right click on the wheels. We're going to max out the spring strength and damper strength so that we actually have control over it when we are driving it. And there's another thing as well. When I built this rover, we put a reaction wheel on it. And I said that we could use that so that if we tip the rover, then we can just turn it on and use the reaction wheel to actually, you know, flip it back over again. However, I did actually get a comment, which was a very good comment, saying that with a reaction wheel on a rover, what you actually want to do is you want to set the torque mode to SAS only. Make sure SAS is hit to the stability on or the little padlock button. And then if we enable torque, it will allow us to drive around as we normally would, but we are much less likely to flip it. And it's a really good comment, is that. It was kind of like one of those eureka moments when I got it. So yeah, thank you very much for that. But anyway, yeah, let's go for a little drive. And as you can see, it's going to take quite a while to get there because it's 12 kilometres away and we don't want to be going too far, or too fast even. So we'll get ourselves on the way, and once we're there, yeah, we'll do our actual science and complete this mission. There we go, just flipped it. So if you do end up flipping it, obviously with the reaction wheel set up as it is, you won't be able to actually flip it over, so we'll just need to right click on that, put the torque mode back to normal, and then we can just get it back onto its wheels again. We'll make sure that the brakes are on as well, because that way we're not likely to go all over the place. But let's try and get ourselves down. It's taking a bit of doing, is this? Come on. I think we're going to have to go the other way around, and fingers crossed we won't break anything. Well, I've never experienced this before. Let's try rolling it instead and see if that'll work. There we go. So that did it. It was a bit faffy was that, but now we can set it back to SAS only. Turn the brakes off, and we'll try and be a bit more careful. But that's one of the problems with going on hills, especially when you're going particularly fast. You can flip the rover quite easily. But yeah, like I say, once we are actually at the monument, we'll be able to do our science. So as I say, I'm just going to go for a nice, careful little drive. It's going to take a little bit of doing because we have to go up and down a few different hills as well. But once we're there, we'll actually be able to do our science. So yeah, I'll probably cut this bit out of the video because it's going to take a little while. I could potentially speed it up. I'll see how it goes when it comes to the edit anyway. But yeah, I'll see you in a second. Coming on a bit of a cliff here. Ooh, this is iffy. Let's hope we get down. Can't bloody see because of the shadow. Oh, here we go, here we go. They're still happy. Anyway, now we are in the crater, we can actually do some more science, so we might as well get a bit of science from the craters biome. See, this is giving us quite a lot of science already. We've got almost, well, ooh, God, we've got 13,000 science just from that so far. So yeah, let's get us to the actual monument, and then we'll be able to finish this mission. Although we still need to take off and get back to Kerbin, of course. So as you've probably noticed, all of these rocks are actually non-collidable. So we can drive straight through them. However, the big rocks around the monument are collidable, so we need to be very careful not to hit them. But that noise tells me that we're actually inside the monument biome now. So yeah, here it is. It's facing away from us, and it looks like the other side is going to be in shade, which is a bit of a shame. But we'll have a quick look at this and see what it looks like. So let's actually get ourselves stopped first. Yeah, let's have a look at this monument. So we can't really see very well from here. We'll go back to the lander and zoom out a bit and see what we can get. Yeah, that's better. So yeah, this is the final main monument in the game at the moment. I've heard a few people say it kind of looks like a squid-faced Buddha, which, if you think about it, it kind of does. But yeah, I really like that. Anyway, like I say, we are now in the correct biome, so we've automatically completed that mission, but of course we need to do a bit of science as well. So we'll hit the science button and do the surface science. And unfortunately that has actually used up all of our electricity, which is unfortunate, and that's part of the problem with going so far. Now, have we actually got all of that science done? Yeah, I think we did manage to get all the science for that, so we're not going to be able to drive this back anytime soon. In fact, we're going to need to try and move it out of the shade, so I'll just undo the brakes and see if it'll roll back, which it will. And now these solar panels aren't 100% brilliant. Because the sun is so far away, they're not going to be very effective on Tylo. But we're going to have to just leave it there and wait for it to actually recharge over time. One way to actually help it recharge is we can actually right click and hibernate the core as well. We could turn off any lights and any and the reaction wheel, and then over time it will slowly recharge. I mean, at the minute it's saying 0 EC per second, but like I say, we're going to have to wait for that essentially. So what I'm probably going to have to do then is I'm probably going to have to call this video here, because that did take quite a long time. We might as well do plant a flag though before we leave. So we'll plant our flag. And then I think, like I say, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to leave it here, wait for the batteries to actually recharge, and then once that's done, I'll take them all the way back to the lander, and we'll probably get into the light takeoff and return to Kerbin in the next one. So, like I say, that's everything for this. it has been quite a challenging one to actually get ready for, and all of the current changes from the recent updates has kind of made it even more difficult for me, which is a bit annoying. But fingers crossed you enjoyed this video. Like I say, we are going to have a little bit of a bonus after this as well, because as I said, some people wanted to see the launch. So what I've done is I've actually created a kind of cinematic launch video for you to have a look at, so feel free to stick around for that. But if you enjoyed this video, then please feel free to like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.
Jose.